The Colts have a busy offseason ahead, so we're going to play a game of sign, trade, and draft today on Locked On Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. I'm Jake Arthur and he is Zach Hicks. You know the two of us from HorseshoeHuddle.com. Today we're going to mastermind the Colts offseason for them. They don't have to worry about it. We're going to take care of it. Everyone knows they need a quarterback and a head coach. Duh. But what else do they need to do? Because they're not the type of team that's just a quarterback and head coach away. They have a lot of work to do. So Zach and I are each going to give some options for guys that we think they should sign in free agency, a trade that we would like to see them make, and non-quarterbacks that we think they should draft as well after the quarterback is taken in the top 5, of course.
Right.
So, Zach, free agent moves. The Colts are in decent shape financially again moving into this one. They'll have a little extra coin when they move on from Matt Ryan. That seems inevitable. There could be some other cap casualties. Probably not as likely, but, Nick Foles could be gone. We've highlighted guys like Ryan Kelly, Kenny Moore before. Financial hits that they could make to create more cap space. But in the present situation, what are some of the guys around the league, some free agents that you think they could really add to this to kind of take them to the next level?
Yeah, so before I jump into that, what the Colts cap situation going into this offseason, I think there was a released report that at the moment they're going to have approximately $13 million in cap space. Now, when they release Matt Ryan, when they release Nick Foles, and ultimately, when they do something with Kenny Moore, that will get around, 33 to 40 million in cap space. So a pretty average, adequate one. And honestly, that's more than enough for what Chris Ballard typically does in free agency. He's not the biggest spender in the world. But I actually highlighted 3 guys here because I go above and beyond. And then I guess I encouraged Jake to do that as well. So he threw a bunch.
Yeah, as soon as I saw your list, I was like, well, all right, add some more.
I was throwing down a bunch of them, and I was like, I'll just pick one. But then I saw you kind of went with me. So, yeah, guys, we have a couple that we're going to talk about here. And I went kind of high, medium, low with mine. My high one, and I was actually shocked until I started doing more research on him, but Detroit Lions guard Evan Brown. 26-year-old. Spotrac has him at 10.4 million per year projection. Now, I'm going to list the Spotrac projections here. I do want you guys to keep in mind that Spotrac is notoriously off with their projections quite a bit. I believe Ferris Campbell's projected at 2.5 million for his next contract right now.
Yes.
And I will eat my hat if it's only like 2 million is his next contract. So I keep this with a grain of salt. Evan Brown could be getting 10.4 million on average on his next contract. He could get 3 million on average. It could be 30 million on average. Spotrac is just really, really, really rough estimate. But Evan Brown, I did look a little bit into his game. Very, very strong run blocker. And that was kind of what I was looking for with a lot of my right guard candidates throughout this process, for trades and for draft picks here is, the Colts, yes, they want to be able to protect this rookie passer, but I feel like they just need that bigger, beefy, strong right guard. That's what Mark Lewinsky was so great at. Mark Lewinsky, when the Colts offensive line was at their peak, at their heyday, they were bullying guys in the trenches. They had across the line from left tackle all the way to right tackle. They had guys that were just pounding these defensive tackles, defensive linemen on the other side of the ball. And we kind of lost a little bit of that. Danny Pinter was getting blown up on every single snap. Will Fries, even though I think he played well down the stretch, is not that kind of overpowering type of guard. Evan Brown was part of that really, really nice run game in Detroit this past year. Really nice power run game, really strong player, only 26 years old. So he's still kind of coming into his own. So if the Colts were going to splurge a little bit on another offensive lineman, Evan Brown would be a very interesting one to add there at right guard to just, again, improve that offensive line, build it back up for that rookie quarterback. Now for my medium guy, Again, this is with the assumption that Kenny Moore II will ultimately be leaving the team this offseason. I like Cameron Sutton from Pittsburgh a lot. He's a slot corner. Spotrac, again, has him at $7.6 million a year. I think personally he's a top 3 slot corner in the game. So it wouldn't shock me if he got, closer to 8, 9, maybe 10 million a year. But yeah, he's a really, really good player. Hard-nosed run defender, good in pass coverage. I think he was the third most interceptions from the slot this year among all slot corners. Just a really, really good player, really heads-up player. I'd be shocked if Pittsburgh lets him go, but hey, if he hits the market, I'm all for it. So yeah, it's another guy I really like there. And then my low one, I think this is one that they should definitely make, again, especially if they move on from Mo Alley Cox, is Josh Oliver, the tight end from the Baltimore Ravens. Now, if you look at Pro Football Focus's grades, the highest rated run blocking, I think, and pass block, just really, really solid across the board. I think he was the highest rated run blocking tight end, though, in the league this year for Pro Football Focus. Really, really steady player. And I think he was like their 4th tight end. So it's not like he was getting a big contract or anything like that. He kind of found his role as a blocking tight end. He did it really well. And that's the one thing the Colts really need in this tight end group. They have the elusive separator in Kylan Granson. They have the athletic freak in Jelani Woods. And they have the wild card in Andrew Ogletree. Now, add in a guy who can just be a pure blocker and only be asked to block. I think you have a really good tight end group with a lot of nice little pieces. So yeah, my high end guy, Evan Brown, if you want to really get another offensive line piece and fix that offensive line. Medium guy, Cameron Sutton from the Pittsburgh Steelers, get a new slot corner in there if they do ultimately move on from Kenny Moore. And then a low end guy, Josh Oliver, to just round out that tight end group.
I really like those. And I kind of, the reasoning behind the guys I picked kind of falls in line with yours as well. My expensive guy is Isaac Seumalo, right guard from the Eagles. If you guys have been watching the Eagles play lately in the playoffs, that offensive line is awesome. Now, Seumalo, taking him individually and plugging him into the Colts, I don't think it's going to be some cure-all. I think they're okay at right guard anyways with Will Fries, but he is playing in between Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson. So that's a pretty big boost that you get. But you watch this guy play, he can be a mauler as well. That Eagles run game has been awesome. Jalen Hurts can run inside and outside with that line. Kenneth Gainwell's done well. Boobie Miles has had a career year. He goes by Boobie sometimes.
I was like, Boobie Miles. Are you just pulling out random names at this point?
Or Miles Sanders, but I think his Twitter thing is Boobie Miles.
Okay, I hope it is, because I was like, are you just pulling out Friday Night Lights references here? Like,
well, hey, why would you not model yourself after that? But no, I think he'd be a good piece to plug in. Now, the concerning thing is the financials. Spotrac does have him projected at $12.1 million. You have Quentin on the other side of the center at $20 million. So it better work out if you're going to pay your guards $32 million, right, basically. Right. So for that reason, I may not be so gung-ho for it, but it's a good player nonetheless. The cheaper version would be Trey Turner from the Commanders. They have him at $2.6 million, which I think is probably lowballing it, but he is 29, so we'll see. So regardless, Turner's probably a cheaper version of that, and it's a veteran guy you can get to compete with Will Fries. So
right,
really no issue there. I'm trying to decide here between DJ Chark or Alan Lazard, but I think it kind of depends on who the Colts get as a coach and quarterback. But if they want to have a vertical game, if they want to really invest in that, DJ Chark would be a good option. He's only 26, which is surprising. I forgot how young he was when he came into the league. But he's kind of had his strengths are pretty similar to Alec Pierce. He was a vertical guy, an outside vertical guy. He can win some of those 50-50 balls. Colts fans probably are more familiar with him when he was just killing them when he was with the Jaguars, but did rebound a little bit with the Lions and that upstart offense. So that's one I've been interested in for a few years now. Always been a pretty good, big DJ Chark fan. And then my cheap one, another tight end, blocking tight end, because again, that's what the Colts need. They have the receiving taken care of. Like, I am super fine with Jelani Woods, Kylan Granson, and whatever Drew Ogletree can give you. But Chris Manhertz from the Jaguars, he's at least like their second or third tight end. So, again, you're not going to be giving him a lot of money. but he ranked very well both as run blocking and pass blocking in Pro Football Focus's metrics there. So if you're going to plug in a guy who's capable of contributing in the run game like the Colts really wanted, to replace Jack Doyle with, that's a guy there, and he's not really going to eat into the important snaps of Jelani Woods and Kylan Granson and those guys. So that's those are some bargain bin guys that I would be totally fine with. They're not going to break the bank, and it's not going to totally shift the trajectory of their free agent focus.
Yeah, and I think they're realistic options too. Like, these aren't guys like we're not listing, go get Tom Brady or something. These are guys that we think that Ballard could target. And I like the Allen Lazard mentioned there too. I know we have to move on here in a second, but Allen Lazard is kind of like a supercharged Zach Pascal. And I think they really missed that element this past season. A really, really good blocking receiver who can kind of do a couple different things. Like, he's not overly consistent or overly great, but he can do a couple things for you. I think Allen Lazard is kind of like that supercharged version of what they're really missing with Zach Pascal. So I do like that shout out as well.
Yeah, he's probably just a touch more expensive than Chark will be, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on, we will get into, some trades we would like to see, and then some non-quarterbacks we would like to see the Colts draft. But first, before all that, it's going to be February. Valentine's Day is coming up, which means romance is in the air more than usual. I don't need to tell you all you lovebirds that you've probably had your date plans on the calendar for weeks, right, fellas? We're all forward thinkers. But have you found the perfect Valentine's Day gift yet? Whether you're celebrating this day of romance or you're ready to pop the question, you can find jewelry as unique as she is with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. At BlueNile.com, you can find the perfect piece of jewelry for life's special moments or even create the custom engagement ring of her dreams. Their simple online tools let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft that perfect piece to your specifications. Blue Nile provides expert guidance, in-depth educational materials, and unique online tools that places you in control, so you can forget the usual hassles of the jewelry shopping process and focus on the romance. Blue Nile's diamond price guarantee allows you to compare a competitor's diamond against one of theirs. Blue Nile can even meet or beat their price. Every order is insured and arrives quickly in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shipping is free, and so are returns. Right now, you can save up to 50% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com for up to 50% off. BlueNile.com. Okay, so trading love on Valentine's Day, trading Colts players and such in the offseason. That was a very good transition.
Yes.
That's what you guys come here for. So, Zach, I don't think there's any blockbuster trades as far as players go in the cards. Maybe they trade a player or two in the offseason, but I don't think there's going to be any huge, they go get DeForest Buckner or they go get Yannick Ngakoue, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there are some modest options out there. What were some of your favorite options that you could see happening?
Yeah, so we were actually talking before we jumped on here about how Chris Ballard loves making these trades to acquire players for the Colts in recent seasons. I think he's done it. He's done so. Actually, I think it's 5 times now, or 6 times even in the last 3 years, because the Matt Pryor deal we didn't even take into account. We didn't take into account the Grant Stewart deal. But for big ones, Yannick Ngakoue was acquired through a trade. Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz, obviously, and obviously the biggest one, DeForest Buckner, the one that he was raving about in his postseason presser, still to this day. He makes a lot of trades to acquire players, whether it's special teams guys or just depth players or big name quarterbacks or big name defensive players. So I would not rule out the Colts making a trade, even if it is a bigger one. The only problem is I don't really see the big trade to be made this offseason. Typically, and Jake and I actually have the same thought process with this, is the guys who are most likely to get traded every offseason now are the receivers coming off of their rookie deals who are going to be free agents the next season, if they don't sign big extensions. And you're basically looking for guys who are like wide receiver 1-ish that are going to get like $20 million a year, or like a lot on their big contract. And And honestly, the only two guys that popped out to me are one that the Colts might trade away, Michael Pittman Jr., which is interesting. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in other episodes. And maybe T. Higgins with the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't see them moving on from T. Higgins because T. Higgins is kind of like a 1B to a 1A rather than a wide receiver too. So ultimately I had to go a lot lower with these trade projections, but that is one that's kind of interesting to me, like what the Bengals do with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. So that could be something that the Colts could get involved in, but ultimately I did go a little bit lower just because I didn't see that big juicy deal that I could see the Colts going after. And I went with Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver from the New England Patriots. I think he's making $5 million next year. That's what his cap hit is going to be. So, the Patriots kind of have other guys that they like to pay and they like to play over him. Jacoby Myers is obviously their top guy there. They just spent a top pick or a second round pick on Tyquan Thornton. There's other guys that like to get involved in that passing game, including Devontae Parker too, who they just traded for.
Yeah.
So they have other guys in front of him, and Kendrick Bourne, every time he's on the field, he makes some plays happen. It's just he's not really been on the field for the New England Patriots. He was one of those bigger signings for them that just didn't really work out. So the Colts could probably get him for like a mid to late day 3 pick. They have a couple extra day 3 picks, from the Nyheim Hines trade. They have that extra day 3 pick. I would not mind whatsoever throwing one of those for Kendrick Bourne, a good route runner who knows how to, get open. And then another one that I had here was more of a salary dump one, Graham Glasgow from the Denver Broncos. He's a 31-year-old interior offensive lineman. Shocker, me going with interior offensive lineman here.
No.
He didn't really pan out. Like, he didn't really pan out to that salary they gave him. He's making $11 million next season. Probably a likely cap casualty for them. But maybe the Colts could swoop in and get him for like a conditional 7th or something, just to kind of take that off the books from him. If the Colts are already planning on not being too active in free agency, you can get a quality interior offensive lineman for, a negligible pick. So those are the two that I highlighted here. I don't love either one of them. I mean, I would probably do the Kendrick Bourne one if it were on the table, but I don't think it's going to be many trades this offseason outside of maybe the Colts trading away some guys. It's kind of just a tough offseason for trades. Not so many guys coming up in 2024 that are really intriguing for me.
Yeah, I think when you look outside of the quarterback market, which it seems like the quarterback market could be really busy this offseason, but we don't expect the Colts to be involved in that for the first time in a few years. So looking at other positions, it just seems like it's going to be kind of quiet, or at least won't have those big splashes. For that reason, I looked at someone who was mentioned in a lot of trade talks during the season before the deadline, KJ Hamler out with the Broncos. He's had some injuries, but he's also kind of been a forgotten guy out there. They've had Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. They've had guys they like to use, Tim Patrick, and he's always kind of the guy that gets kind of shuffled down the board a little bit. Still just 23 years old. Definitely smaller than what Chris Ballard would normally go for, but he is the small, crisp route runner, shifty slot receiver type. I think his value is really at like an all-time low right now. Not necessarily his own fault, but the Broncos' offense was just bad. And again, he's had injuries, so I would think you could get him for a day 3 pick. Maybe actually not even round 3. I don't see why a team would do that. But just $2.2 million on his last year and his deal going in, so that's dirt cheap as well. So I would do it. Another guy, and you actually tweeted about this the other day, the Raiders reportedly are expected to shop Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow. Now, I don't have Darren Waller involved. That's expensive, and you have up-and-coming guys at the position, and he's not really a blocker. So it's just not – there's no point in that there. Hunter Renfrow, for a lot of the same reasons as KJ Hamler for me, can be a devastating route runner at times, seems to catch everything. And, again, the Raiders have invested in other receivers and things like that. So if Renfrow is available, he's a quarterback's best friend type of receiver. Derek Carr blew up with him the year before, so that was pretty good. I would think maybe round 4 for him. He's making a lot of money though. $13 million plus each in these next 2 years. He does have an out in his contract after 2024 though, which would only be like $5 million in dead cap. So a contract that's not terrible to work with if you don't like what you're getting in that 1 year. So
Yeah. Last thing
I'm
I'll say
good with the
before we
receiver.
move on is Hunter Renfrow would be a fascinating conversation to have because production wise, he's probably worth like a second round pick, production, but I think he's 27, like you said there. And he's a guy who is kind of having a down year. He's not going to win with physical traits or anything like that. So he's not going to be your wide receiver one, but maybe a team like the Colts could swoop in, or a team like the Bills, I think, would be really interested in that there.
Yeah.
But he'd be really interesting to see if he hits the open market, the open trade market. But guys, coming up, we are going to talk about draft prospects that we love. And speaking of draft prospects, Locked On is heading to the Senior Bowl. Me and Jake aren't going to be down there this year, but don't worry, you guys can still follow Locked On's analysis. You guys can get inside analysis from the hosts that cover the NFL's next generation in college and find out which NFL draft boards these players will be climbing, all in one location. Subscribe to Locked On NFL Draft for nightly live shows from the Senior Bowl on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party. Oh, sorry, you guys are listening. The ads kind of went together there. But also, this show is brought to you by our favorite sponsor, FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America, FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with our no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score the first touchdown. For Conference Championship Sunday, FanDuel Sportsbook had both the Eagles and Chiefs as 2.5-point favorites. Obviously, if you bet on the Eagles, and I think the Chiefs as well, the Chiefs covered that as well. So yeah, if you guys bet on the favorites there, I think you were doing pretty good. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, this official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Jake. So I'm just stumbling and tripping here. So I'm just going to fall into this last segment here.
That was a lot of words.
That was a lot of words, word salad, clunky transitions. But don't worry, we're going to be rolling into this last segment here. We're going to talk some NFL draft. And I know we haven't been able to have too many draft conversations on this podcast yet because everything has been quarterback focused or head coach focused. We haven't really talked too much about other prospects besides quarterbacks. So, Jake, who are some guys that you really like early on in this draft process?
Yeah, so I think this first one kind of depends on what quarterback the Colts get. If they wind up with C.J. Stroud, then I could see a scenario where they're sitting there, with their pick near the top of the second, and maybe they want to move up a little bit if Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State is there. Now, was obviously limited with the hamstring, but going into the season, Marvin Harrison Jr. wasn't the one necessarily dominating all the headlines. Jackson Smith and Jigba was a great prospect as well. It wasn't just Marvin. It was the two of them. So a little bit of a forgotten man. If the Colts grab Stroud and they want to pair him with his old running mate again, and even if he slips to that top of round 2 and they don't have to move up, all the better. At that pick, also Osiris Torrance, guard from Florida. We've talked about their need for a guard to shove Will Fries a little bit for some playing time, and now a guy who looks like literally every cartoon character I've ever seen in my life, Cody Mauch, I think, from North Dakota State. Have you seen his mug?
Yeah, so if you guys
team photo.
Yeah. So if you guys don't know, for the Indy Draft Guide, I write up all offensive line reviews and profiles, and I've already graded Torrance and Mauch, and Mauch is like one of my highest rated tackles right now. Actually, I don't have him at a guard yet. I still have him at tackle until someone tells me otherwise. I'm keeping him at tackle. His film is so good. He's so good, guys. Like he moves like a tight end. but he hits you like he's a 350-pound offensive lineman. He's just an absolute blast. Yes, the arm length will be a concern. He might move to guard, but I don't care where you put him, guard, tackle, wherever. And again, the hair, everything, the missing front teeth. This is an offensive lineman, 100%. I love his game. Like, I'm so glad you had him on here because he's like one of my favorite prospects right now.
Yeah, NDSU has cranked out some really good offensive line prospects in recent years, and he might be the best of them that we've seen in a long time, wouldn't you think?
Oh, yeah. And I was super high on Cordell Volson last year, too. I actually had Cordell Volson as a third-round pick. He ended up going, I think, in the 5th or 6th to the Bengals and started every single snap for them this year. So Malk, I think, is the best one I've graded. I would have him over Dylan Reduns as well. So, yeah, I think he's the best one that they've been able to produce out of, again, for an FCS program. This is a phenomenal offensive line just workshop they have going there. So, yeah, Malk is great. He's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, my last one, just because, and I think we'll probably wind up doing an episode or at least a segment on this topic. I'm really enamored with the idea of the Colts grabbing 2 quarterbacks. Obviously one first, wait a little bit and you can get another one. But like if Hendon Hooker's there in the 3rd round, his age and he has the ACL, if he's still there, why not? Are you really going to waste a pick looking for, you need a long-term solution at this position. It makes it so you don't have to put all those eggs in that one basket with that first player. Sure, you hope they work out, but you get a talented player like Hendon Hooker who could pan out as well. It's the whole RG3 Kirk Cousins thing with Washington back in the day, which honestly that worked out for them.
Kinda, yeah. I mean, I was there. Obviously, it could have worked out better.
It could have better if it were another team.
Yeah, I mean, it could have worked. As someone who was in love with that 2012 season with RG3, it could have worked a little better. But
Andrew Luck should have won that Rookie of the Year, though.
No. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, no, I love those picks there. And Hendon Hooker is a guy I'm very intrigued by. And I know our comment section is very high on Hendon Hooker, too. We see a lot of comments about Hendon Hooker over these top 4 guys and stuff, or wait to take Hendon Hooker and take Willie Anderson at 4 and crazy stuff like that. So I'm sure they'll love that what you just said there. I went with a couple of not as well-known guys, but some guys I think would really fit the Colts. First is cornerback Jalen Jones from Texas A&M. He's a guy who is extremely long, really physical, like 6'3", like 210, strong corner, kind of fits that Rock Ya-Sin type mold that the Colts were missing this past season. So I think getting him in here and kind of getting him on the same developmental path of Rock Ya-Sin would be phenomenal. I also went interior offensive line, but I went with I think he's my top graded interior offensive lineman right now. He might be 1 or 2. Andrew Voorhees from USC. First of all, great last name, a terrifying last name for an interior offensive lineman. Voorhees.
He'll kill you.
Yeah, he'll kill it. He's going to kill it out there. But he's a guy who reminds me a lot of Frank Ragnow over with the Detroit Lions, who's an all-pro center for the Lions. So I'm very, very high on Andrew Voorhees. And then I went to the wide receiver as well, Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss, round 3 to 4 type projection. Again, he's like a bigger type guy, like 6'2", 210, 220. Good blocker, really good after the catch. I really feel like the Colts need kind of more rackability after the catch. And it doesn't have to be with a guy who runs 4.2, 4.3. It can just be a guy who sheds those tackles after the catch. So I really like Jonathan Mingo, and I think he's going to be in a spot where the Colts could take him there in the middle rounds. And my last one here, we look at this Colts pass rush, and I think they have the do-it-all guy in Kwity Paye. They have the versatile player in Dio Dangbo who can play inside and out. And obviously they have the stud 3 tech in DeForest Buckner. I want that Kamoko Toure mold to just work once. I just want it to work in Indy one time. And I want a defensive coordinator coming here that's going to use that role. And Will McDonald from Iowa State is just a guy who fits that role. He's not that big. I think he's like 235, 240. One of those skinnier type guys. And you don't need to play him every snap. Just get him out there for those third down pass rushes. Let him rush off the edge. Let him be that kind of Leo type role in those classic Seattle days. And just get after it. Super bendy, super athletic, great spin move. I really like Will McDonald, and I think in that 2 to 3 round range, if the Colts want to just go more pass rusher, Will McDonald can maybe be the Kamoko Toure that works for the Colts. So those are my couple guys I have there. Voorhees is definitely my highest graded of the bunch, but I'd be happy with any of those guys on day 2, day 3.
Yeah, man, I see a window for us to get a lot more into this. We'll start matching specific quarterbacks with specific follow up draft picks. I'm really digging that topic.
Yeah.
But that is it for us today. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow to give you the pulse of this head coaching search. There was even more stuff today. Brian Callahan, the Colts are going to look to get a second interview with him. So we're going to try and get even more guests like we've had in the last couple weeks to come talk with us and you guys to tell us more about these head coaching candidates.
Yep, and hopefully we have a head coach by later this week or early next week or sometime, man. I'm ready to have a head coach and just start the content after having the head coach. Make sure you guys are following along at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. Also, subscribe to the Locked On Colts podcast on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. We love your guys' ratings and reviews and your comments, so please keep leaving them there. And thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you the local insights you love to the national spotlight with daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you guys tomorrow.